Can you see my screen and hear me all right?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brianna. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm going to give just an overview of some of our work in the Grand River Coastal Corridor and some of our collaborative efforts and just what makes this area such a special place. And unfortunately, I'm only going to be scratching the surface today, but would love to connect outside of the webinar if you're interested in learning more. And I'll have some follow-up resources as well if you want to dig a little bit deeper. Just a little bit of background about myself. Let me make sure I can first advance my slides. As Brianna mentioned, I am the conservation manager for Michigan for Audubon Great Lakes. I've been in this role for about a year and a half now. I grew up in the Grand River Coastal Corridor, actually. I grew up in Holland, Michigan. So this place is very near and dear to me. And what makes it really special to me is now that I'm in this role and working pretty frequently in the area, I'm getting to learn even more about the area that I didn't even know growing up. And I'm visiting many places that I had never even visited in my nearly 18 years of living there while I was growing up. And some of the places that I did get to visit growing up, I'm gaining new memories in those areas by getting to visit them and getting to implement some of our conservation in this area. So for today, I'm gonna just give a little introduction to who Audubon Great Lakes is, give a little bit of background about what the Grand River Coastal Corridor is, especially because there's a few different names being tossed around out there, and then give a little bit of an overview of some of our conservation in the Grand River Coastal Corridor. And then some ways that you can get involved. Some of this is a little bit, as far as the how you can help is a little bit public facing, but great opportunities to share with members of your organizations or folks that you're working with or friends and family. And then some opportunities to get out and enjoy the Grand River Coastal Corridor as well if you're ever in the area visiting or if you live in the area. And then we'll have time for some questions and answers. So Audubon Great Lakes is a regional office of the National Audubon Society, and we cover 5 Great Lakes states. So we have work going on throughout Michigan, of course, and then Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And then we also have other regional offices throughout covering some of the other Great Lakes states. We're based in Chicago, but we have staff all throughout the region working remotely. And then we have many members and nature centers as well throughout the region. And our primary mission is to protect coastal wetlands throughout the region for birds as well as for people. And our science team has identified 12 of the most important priority regions to focus our efforts to maximize our impact. So these are areas that have high priority Great Lakes coastal wetlands for us to focus our resources within. And in Michigan, we have 4 of these priority regions. So we have the Straits of Mackinac and St. Mary's River, we have Saginaw Bay, Detroit and St. Clair Flats, and then Eastern Lake Michigan. Which is the priority region that we're going to be focusing in on today. And these priority regions also overlap with Audubon important bird areas. And the Eastern Lake Michigan lakeshore, the priority region, also overlaps with the Michigan long-tailed duck important bird area, which is a globally recognized important area. But we also have throughout the state, we have 9 other globally recognized IBAs and about 93 state recognized IBAs scattered throughout. And so particularly the one on the eastern lakeshore of Lake Michigan is recognized for the large numbers of wintering long-tailed ducks and other diving ducks and waterfowl that it supports during these wintering months. And one of my favorite new memories that I've gotten to create in the Grand River Coastal Corridor is getting out on the pier in Grand Haven and seeing my first white-winged scoter out there and some rafts of some long-tailed ducks. And so super fun. So the Grand River Coastal Corridor is nestled within this Eastern Lake Michigan priority region, again, overlapping with some of these IBAs. The Grand River Coastal Corridor specifically, though, is this area spanning from Port Sheldon up to Muskegon, also sometimes referred to as the Western Lake Michigan or Western Michigan Coastal Corridor. But the Grand River Coastal Corridor, the core area of it is this area that's more concentrated in Ottawa County. So kind of more concentrated around the mouth of the Grand River itself in the Grand Haven area. And part of what makes this area so special are these high quality wetlands and just abundance of wetland habitat throughout the Grand River corridor. And it supports secretive marsh birds such as this least bittern here, and as well as many other marsh dependent species. And that's part of what makes this region so special as well, is not only these important wetland habitats, but also the diversity of habitats that are converging in this area. We have dune and beach habitat that's supporting species such as the spotted sandpiper, even on some of the northern areas of this West Michigan corridor, supporting species like our threatened and endangered piping plover. We also have forest habitat too that's supporting thrush species and many warblers. And then, of course, I had to throw in a picture of a muskrat. Muskrats are near and dear to me. And so they're supporting mammalian species as well as fish and invertebrates. So just a wide diversity of species that this corridor is supporting. And of course, our wetlands and all these habitats are super important for human dynamics as well, providing ecosystem services and recreational opportunities. And this corridor is really important for bird migration. Michigan is at this intersection of two migratory flyways, our Mississippi Flyway and the Atlantic Flyway. And as these birds are funneling up through these flyways during migration, they're funneling through the Great Lakes region. And rather than taking that long path over the open water, they're concentrating along these lake shores and using these resources along the lake shore for stopover. And this diversity of habitat is offering just a buffet of resources for these birds to be able to use to fuel them on their migration journey. And we are in the peak of fall migration here, believe it or not. I don't know how it's October 2nd, but here we are. And just last night, we were seeing hundreds of millions of birds filling our skies over the US last night. And so Birdcast is a really cool tool that you can follow to see the migration in action. And we're just going to keep playing that on repeat, I guess. But as I'm sure many of you are aware, our wetlands are facing many threats, all the way from development to invasive species to climate change. And this is just a fun, maybe not so fun example of one of those threats. This was actually me conducting marsh bird surveys out at St. Clair Flats, where there is significant Phragmites invasion. And so this little channel that I was in was probably the more open part of the channel that I was in. And it got to a point where my kayak paddle couldn't fit through the channel, so I was grabbing onto the Phragmites and kind of scooting myself through the channel. So I'm sure you're aware of many of these threats that are unfortunately facing our wetlands. And so this is part of why we are taking actions in regions like the Grand River Coastal Corridor. And in 2021, Audubon, in partnership with Ottawa County Parks and over 20 stakeholders, developed the Grand River Coastal Corridor study. And this allowed us to further assess the corridor and develop conservation recommendations in this area, in this corridor. And it further identified some of the critical wetland habitat which is in the top 20% of priority wetlands. Um, so help to further focus and identify some of the importance of this region and help us identify specific sites that are of conservation importance and concern. And one of the recommendations that came out of that 2021 report was to develop specific conservation recommendations um, for the corridor and to develop a specific conservation plan. And this was wrapped up this year in 2025 in partnership with all of these folks that are listed down here. So Ottawa County Parks and the West Michigan Environmental Action Council. Many partners were involved in developing this Grand River Coastal Corridor Conservation Plan to help further guide collaboration in the corridor to implement conservation, offer some recommendations for landowners as well as land managers to help protect and restore and enhance this corridor. So an example of some of this work that has been done, but also can be done in this corridor is our Ottawa Sands wetland restoration. And this was wrapped up just last year in partnership with the Ottawa County Parks and the DNR and many others funded by GLRI and the WEGI Foundation. So this is just an example of one of the restoration projects. Ottawa Sands was a former sand mining operation. So this aerial imagery here shows the sand mine in operation. And this is an aerial image of the site as well, just after restoration. But once the sand mining operations were um, done. The site, it appeared to be pristine, however, was not providing any nutrition. It wasn't providing proper nutrition for the fish species that were stocked after the property was acquired by Ottawa County Parks. So there were surveys that were done, and it showed that the fish population in that lake were not they were emaciated, they were not getting proper nutrition. And it didn't hold it lacked emergent vegetation and wetland habitat. So the shoreline was reformed. There were emergent vegetation plugs that were planted. There was coarse woody debris that was put out, installed into the edges of the lake to offer improved wetland habitat in this lake. And then there were also about 6 acres of interdunal wetlands that were restored, which you can see in this photo to the right. And you can also see in this more recent aerial imagery of the site. So to go back to show you this was when the sand mining operation was still underway, and then now with this is post restoration. So you can see these tiered interdunal wetlands that were restored to offer enhanced habitat. And then there's also, I forgot to throw in some photos, but there are also some amazing tree houses and yurts that you can go camping in. So be sure to check those out. They're super cool. And then it's also it lies within right along the Grand River and just adjacent to the SAG. So this is the SAG. It's one of the sites that we monitor for marsh birds, as well as Harbor Island, which you can see here. I hope you can see my cursor. Apologies if not. And that is also a high priority wetland site that we are looking at. And it is currently undergoing remediation efforts. And you can go to visit Harbor Island I think it's .com. I can share that resource to follow along on the progress with that and get involved if you're interested. There's still much more input that can be provided for conservation opportunities at that site. And on the policy front, we actually were able to do a bird walk with Congresswoman Hillary Scholten out at Ottawa Sands this past year. We had an absolutely perfect day. It was warm and sunny, and there were tons of folks that were out there utilizing the recently reopened park. And there were students out there doing some volunteer work, and there were folks biking and hiking around, and we got to see quite a few fun birds and just really further emphasize the importance of funding like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which helped to fund the restoration project and get further support from our policymakers and to put some of these other opportunities like Harbor Island on their radars and why it's so important to continue to conserve and enhance these areas. So I mentioned that a couple of those sites that we monitor marsh birds at, Ottawa Sands is also one of them. We have 6 sites in Ottawa County that we are monitoring for what we refer to as secretive marsh birds. So species such as this Virginia rail here, this Sora, least bittern, American bittern. We also monitor for some secondary species such as American coot, swamp sparrow. We also monitor for black terns. 14 different species, I believe it is, that we monitor for in Ottawa County, and this can really help us gauge how some of these sites are doing. It can give us a baseline in some of these areas that are more pristine that we are currently monitoring. It can give us a reference point to some of the other sites, and sites like Ottawa Sands, where we just did a recent restoration project. It can help us assess the impact of that restoration project. So we were doing monitoring prior to the restoration, and we're continuing to monitor it post-restoration so we can see how the birds respond to that restoration project and how that compares to the other sites in the corridor that we are monitoring. I just had a fun video of us out in this is Bruce Bayou out there. It was a really beautiful kind of foggy morning. And then I should have tested the volume on this, but this is least bittern that was calling up in this vegetation. It's a little too quiet, but um, and we have a GIS story map for our marsh bird monitoring. If you scan the QR code, I can also follow up with a link to this, but it just goes a little bit more in depth, and I actually just have a quick walkthrough of it. So it talks about our priority species, which I mentioned a little bit. And then it gives a little overview of the sites that we're monitoring throughout the county and the corridor. So there you can see Bruce Bayou that I mentioned, Indian Channel here, and then up here is where we have Ottawa Sands and the Sag and Harbor Island. And there's different GIS features in this tool as well. You can overlay important bird areas and priority wetlands. And we also have a couple other GIS tools that we've developed throughout this conservation planning. We have a Grand River Coastal Corridor dashboard, and that has many features to it so that you can overlay eBird data with priority wetland data, and that helped to inform the conservation plan as well. So in this marsh bird monitoring data, you can go to the different sites and see where birds were detected, what years they were detected in. And then we also do vegetation surveys while we're out doing these surveys. So if there were any photos from those habitat surveys, we've linked them in here as well so that you can see what the habitat looked like at those monitoring points from year to year. And then just kind of, and then you can, so Ottawa Sands didn't have too many detections just because it's still very early post restoration. We have not quite had a response yet. We're still waiting for some of that emergent vegetation to take hold and for the birds to respond to that. And then we just give a little overview of the occupancy data and evaluation from our marsh bird data that we've collected. And we'll see if it lets me advance. So what are some of the takeaways and some of our next steps? The main takeaway is just how special and important the Grand River Coastal Corridor is, not only for birds, which of course are our priority, but also for people. And as I mentioned, that's really one of our key missions is to protect the places that birds need, but also that humans need. And these places, such as the Grand River Coastal Corridor, where land meets water, is really valuable and important. So that's just a main takeaway. And we have some of these pristine wetland sites already, and we have work being done, such as the Ottawa Sands restoration. But a main takeaway coming out of this conservation planning is just that there's more work to be done, and there's many more opportunities to take action and to get into to dig into some of the conservation opportunities, and none of that can be done without collaboration. So we're really looking to continue collaborating with the partners that we've been working with, Ottawa County Parks and Recreation, and all the many other folks that have been involved in this conservation planning in the Grand River Coastal Corridor, and also collaboration with other members, other stakeholders in the area too. We've had quite a bit of stakeholder participation, as I mentioned in that 2021 report. We've used some of that stakeholder input for many of the other planning efforts as well. And since this area is so important for recreation and tourism, and it's really important to get that stakeholder feedback and ensure that we are implementing conservation in an equitable way as well. So as I mentioned, some of these are a little bit public facing, but just some of the resources that we have available so that you're aware as well. Our newsletters, of course, to stay in touch with opportunities that we have. And we have a site there too where folks can get involved. And community science is a big part of this too. We've used eBird data to help inform a lot of the conservation work that we do. So getting the public engaged in our community science opportunities and helping to provide those community science data that we can help to use to inform our conservation work. And our chapters are very involved as well. So we have the Washtenaw Islands chapter in the Grand River Coastal Corridor area. And they are very involved and have been a great resource, very involved in our marsh bird. All of our marsh bird monitoring is really driven by our volunteers in the area. So I get to go out every once in a while and help out, and we have great folks that are driving the efforts out there, but a lot of it is really volunteer based. So our chapters are critical for that. And then also on the policy front, so we have a page where folks can sign up to learn how they can become an advocate for this work and to contact their policymakers to help support funding like GLRI that I've mentioned. So as I mentioned, I kind of really only got to scratch the surface. Um, and we have so much that's still kind of in the works and underway. So I'd love to connect if you want to connect further on some of this. If you have anything that you're involved with in the area that you want to collaborate on or learn more about. Um, and I can also put, yeah, contact information up. And then I think that we might have an opportunity to share some follow-up resources, as well as some of those links that I mentioned. And yeah, I think that that's all for me. So yeah, if we want to take some questions, I think you can drop them in the Q&A feature, correct, Brianna?
Yeah, thank you, Kylie. This was really cool project, and we've been kind of talking to you guys for a couple years, just after we first heard about this. So we're glad that finally, gave it a few years, and you guys are able to report some more on this. We do have a couple questions. One is great presentation. Do you know where can I learn more about the Detroit and St. Clair Flats corridor?
Oh, um, yeah, to learn more about some, I mean, I'd be happy to connect directly about some of the work that we have going on and out in St. Clair Flats in the Detroit area. Um, Yeah, I'd be happy to, or I think on our website too, if you just go to Audubon Great Lakes, and then you can go to conservation and it kind of has an overview of all of our priority areas. And so the Detroit and St. Clair Flats area is one of our priority regions, and you can learn more about the work that we're doing there.
Okay, perfect. Also, there was a question about, sorry, what is SAG?
Oh, this egg is the name of that little um what's the term that I'm looking for? That little bay, I guess, that little area off from the Grand River that I showed. So that's just the name of that. It's called the SEG, yeah. And that's one of our marsh bird monitoring sites.
Okay, cool. And let's see. I did have a question. How long will you guys continue the monitoring, or kind of what is the next steps for this project?
Yeah, we're going to continue monitoring as long as we have funding to support the monitoring. That is a big part of it. We have grants that are supporting monitoring throughout the region, but we're hoping to expand our marsh bird monitoring through not only the Grand River Coastal Corridor, but also through that whole Eastern Lake Michigan priority region that we have. We're looking to expand our marsh bird monitoring, but it's really funding dependent. And so the funding that we have now can continue to support those specific sites that I've mentioned through next year. But then as we look into some additional restoration projects, we'll probably be building in funding into some of those outlooks as we're able to further support the monitoring. So at least through next year, and then beyond that is going to be funding dependent.
Okay. Other than your St. Clair Flats and Detroit corridor, is there any other kind of upcoming projects that you guys are considering or?
Yeah, we secured funding to do a feasibility study up in Saginaw Bay at Wigwam Bay State Wildlife Area, specifically relative to our black tern work that we've been doing through the state. So we're going to conduct a feasibility study up there to address some opportunities to implement conservation to enhance the wetlands up there, create more wetland connectivity up there to benefit the black tern, but also other wetland dependent species and priority fish species. And we have other opportunity. We have some things on the horizon in the Upper Peninsula as well, but those are a little bit more early stages. We don't have funding secured yet for some of the opportunities up there. But black tern, yeah, we're really looking to drive some of our black tern conservation work. We just put together a black tern conservation action plan this year. If you want to learn more about that, I would be happy to connect. And actually, I would love your input on that as well. We are hoping to get our black tern conservation initiative started, and we're hoping to hold a meeting this winter for that. And we're looking for some input on potentially getting a working group going for that. So if you're interested in that, I would love to connect um, and we actually have had some black tern. We've seen some had some black tern records in the Grand River Coastal Corridor this year. So we're going to continue monitoring that to see if we have any breeding activity. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting projects on the horizon. Yeah, I think following this webinar, we are going to try to send out an email to everyone that attended and just kind of maybe you can compile a list of, kind of how to contact some good resources that we can provide. And I think that would be something that most people on the call will enjoy. There's one more question. It says, you mentioned eBird. Can anyone record a sighting on eBird?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a public database. So if you just go to eBird, you can install the app. You can go to ebird.org. And yeah, you can report any bird sightings that you have. You can do full checklists. If you're out on a hike, you can record anything that you see, or if you just happen to have an incidental sighting, if you're out and about and you're like, oh, let's say you see a black tern, you can just report that singular sighting. So yeah, that's actually a really useful tool that has helped support some of our black tern work to supplement our monitoring efforts.
Okay, good. There's another question. Does data on priority species sightings that are submitted to eBird on Ottawa Sands County get used in monitoring data for that area?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just rereading the question. Yeah, so we as far as our specific marsh bird monitoring, the occupancy analysis that we're doing is just with those specific data that we're collecting from the marsh bird monitoring. However, we have used eBird data in some of the other GIS tools that we've done, and we're looking at that as a whole for informing some of our conservation work. So we kind of have like sometimes they're compartmentalized. As I mentioned, just the occupancy analysis that we're doing is just our specific data. But we try and pool all of those resources as much as we can when we're informing conservation action. And that includes eBird data as well. And we're looking into Great Lakes Coastal Wetland Monitoring Program as well. They have some sites throughout the Grand River Coastal Corridor that they have multiple years of monitoring data for. And that was actually a fun connection that I've had back to the Grand River Coastal Corridor too, is I went to Central Michigan University and got to participate on the coastal wetland monitoring team and got to do some surveys out in the Grand River Coastal Corridor area. And now I'm in a position where I get to use some of those data to help inform the work that we're doing.
Well, now I definitely have to go revisit Ottawa Sands. It's been, I think, at
Mhm.
least 4 years for me, so I can't wait to check it out. Is it open to the public then?
Yeah, it's fully open. So yeah, you can visit that anytime, and the camping facilities are open for reservations as well. They also have some tent sites. Yeah, definitely worth checking out. I love opportunities to go there.
Oh yeah. I love the West Side. I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. So but yeah, I don't see any more questions. But We will just do a follow-up email, get some of your information, and then send some of the resources and tools out to the attendees. So thank you so much. This was so interesting and a long-awaited presentation. So thanks for doing this for us, and we hope to collaborate soon.
Great, thank you so much. And yeah, I hope to connect with many of you that were joining today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.